I'm going to talk a little bit about Swimage Encore and how it handles hardware drivers. Okay, I've got up on the screen the Swimage Encore console, which is basically the web application that you launch from just about any browser, anywhere in the environment. Connect to your Swimage server and go under Computers, and you'll see two different options under here specifically designed for hardware management. There's the Hardware Manager, which is generally a list of all your different hardware types, hardware models, that sort of thing. I'll go in here real quick so you can kind of see the sample that I have. So I've got a whole bunch of Dell computers in here, and they're basically sorted by model number. And you've got manufacturer and model, which is pulled off of the BIOS of those systems. Now, this information is populated a couple of different ways. It's populated either from SCCM, SMS, Altiris, whatever you have Swimage integrated to, or if you happen to boot up to a machine using the Swimage bare metal boot disk, it'll automatically read that information and populate the table of different models with that information. So that's a nice way of provisioning new systems that come in that you don't currently have in your ESD. The other area is driver management. So driver management is not model-based, but driver-based. So you'll go in, you may find drivers for, your NVIDIA cards and network cards and those sorts of things, and that's actually where they get populated. And so we keep track of all the different drivers available and all of the versions and class and that sort of thing all in our drivers. What you do in the driver manager is you will, create a set of drivers that will be associated to a specific machine, and then you make that association, which is basically down here the associated hardware. So you could select a driver and find out under the associated hardware which models of laptops or desktops that driver happens to belong to or associated with. You could also take the same approach the other direction and again look at your hardware manager and look at, say, the Dell 510, for example, and this will give you the list of associated driver sets. So you can go either way and find out, what drivers are associated with what models. Okay, so in order to provision then drivers, what you have to do is you have to identify the model, which we have here, and then identify the driver set. Now, getting the driver sets can be done a couple of different ways. Okay. So I go back up to the driver manager. I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I want a new driver set. So I'll click on that, and what it's going to do is it's going to come up and load our driver searcher tool. Okay, this thing comes up. Okay, and this gives us the ability to extract drivers from different areas. Okay, you've got a computer search, and what this will do is this will search the local computer. So if you happen to be running, on the computer you want to get the drivers for, it'll actually search the local computer for the drivers and extract them directly. This is assuming installed drivers. So if you have a machine that gets from the manufacturer, proves that everything's working just fine, you can run this on that new model and go local, and it will grab the drivers directly off of that. The other thing is if you can do basically the same thing, but do it remotely. So if you have admin access and that remote or machine does not have firewall blocking access to this, you can type in the remote machine and it will do the same thing. It actually goes out and extracts the drivers. We call that vampire mode, where it's going in and investigating what drivers are installed, and it actually goes through and reverse engineers how the INF was created and finds the drivers associated where they get installed and actually pulls those drivers directly out. The other method is to select a directory and grab the drivers from there. This is actually the most reliable method to do this, although the other ones work. Sometimes you'll run across, when you do the vampire mode process, a driver or an IF that wasn't really created all that well, and so reverse engineering may miss a few things, and so every so often it doesn't work doing it that way, which make sure you test all your systems before you assume that it's going to work, obviously, in all the methods. But nevertheless, this is the most reliable. And what you do with the directory search is you're basically going to the manufacturer for that driver, create a directory. I usually, throw a local directory on my Swimage server for hardware, and then I break it out by model, and then I put the different driver sets in those various directories, and then I go into select directory, and I can actually, pull the drivers directly from that. That's typically how we end up doing that. So, for example, I have, the Optiplex 390, and I've broken that out into, I go on the, Win732, and I can hit OK on that, and then I say search directory, and it'll search that directory for those specific drivers. Okay, and then the other one is you can select individual files, which is, say, just want an INF file, pull it in, you can do that. And finally, the other type of extraction of drivers is actually a program. So a lot of times you're going to find that it's not a plug-and-play device. It may be something that requires a setup or, some other program to run for that driver or that hardware device to be activated. And so we support being able to launch an executable, assuming, though, that it's in silent mode. And I'll get into that in a little bit, exactly how to do that. But it does have to be silent because when you run this executable, it actually launches during the deployment process, and if it's not a silent executable, probably it's going to stop the automated deployment. So we want to make sure that that's taken care of, so any silent switches or packaging necessary around that is needed. Okay, once you've grabbed the driver, like I got this driver from this directory that I pointed to, it jumps over to upload. Upload is basically, where you're going to put the drivers when you're done with it. So you have the option to add it to WinPE. Okay, the default is no. Adding to WinPE is really, is this a driver do you want in your boot disk that you're going to boot up and do deployments with? WinPE is not an operating system that's necessary beyond just the deployment itself, and the only requirement that WinPE has is that it has network drivers, video drivers, sound drivers, pretty much anything other than a network driver is not needed. So I always create a separate process for WinPE, specifically for network only, so I don't make a mistake and actually put, a video driver in there, because it could actually break the WinPE boot disk if you do that. So leave that to know if you're just, putting driver sets in for a particular model. Okay. The other thing I do is a prefix for this driver set name. This is optional, but best practice is actually put a prefix name in here. So for this particular one, this is, the Optiplex 390. So that's kind of the prefix I would put in, and once that's in there, it's going to predefine these drivers associated to this driver set. That way, it makes it real easy later on if I wanted to sort and extract, specifically drivers for this Optiplex. I'll know specifically about that from the prefix name. Okay, I'll go ahead and select hardware. Now, this hardware is basically the hardware pulled up from your inventory. So this is the Optiplex 390, for example, and I will go ahead and add that. Okay, and then if you wanted to add hardware, you could as well. If it's not in the database, this is where you would do it. And you have to select an operating system as well. This driver happens to be associated to Win7 32-bit. I said that previously when I selected the correct directory. I'll associate that, and so there's two main associations you need before you can save a driver set. It has to have a hardware associated to it, and it has to have an operating system. Once you get those two, you can simply say save driver set, and we'll go through and save the driver set for that Optiplex 390. Okay, it is fairly simple. So it says saving driver sets to Swimage. So what it's doing is it's taking those drivers out of the directory, creating a library structure under Swimage with unique GUIDs, and creating a library based on that. So it's a pretty straightforward process as far as uploading those. Now you see once that is done, all these messages go to success, and it's now uploaded those drivers. So we should be good to go now. All right, let me close that out. Notice one thing too, when you upload drivers, there's something important here that has changed. A change in the Swimage distribution point requires your DPs to be uploaded. Okay, basically what that means is that you've added drivers to the system. Those drivers are not going to be available until your distribution points are updated. So what you have to do is go into the administration and go into the ESD. Outside I can actually enter setup ESD connections and update your distribution points. Fairly simple process. We're not going to get into that. That's a separate video to do that. But I just wanted to remind you of this change up here based on your hardware drivers. The other area in which you can do settings for the hardware devices is actually in our tools Encore Overture. Overture is an extension to Swimage that adds additional functionality. More advanced stuff is in Overture. So a couple of things on Hardware Manager. We pull this thing up under the Overture. It's got the same listing of all your hardware drivers, or all your hardware models, sorry. And you can go in and select any of these and say Edit Hardware, for example. And it gives you additional options. It shows approved operating systems. This is an important tab because if you don't approve an operating system for this particular hardware, we've intentionally made it so that it will not deploy. There's a setting to change on, and I can show you that in a little bit, to override this so you don't have this safety net. But this safeguard is in place so that let's say you get a new model in there, it hasn't been provisioned for any drivers, you can't deploy to it until you've gone in and approved it. So it goes through this hardware device and says which type of operating system is this approved for, and you can go ahead and say this is XP 32-bit, Windows 32-bit, Windows 64, and then save that, and that's basically going to allow you to deploy this machine. You do have to do this out of box if you want to deploy to this hardware. Otherwise, you'll get an error message saying this machine has not been approved for this operating system. Okay. The other thing you can do in the Hardware Manager is our Matching tab. Matching tab allows you to put in wildcards. This is actually a very powerful feature because wildcard matching allows you to consolidate different models into a single model type without having to provision every single model with various hardware. So let's take a look real quickly at hardware wildcarding, and I'll show you kind of how that works. So we have here the same list of hardware devices. Now, one for one, each hardware device has a matching rule of driver sets that we talked about a little bit earlier. So wildcarding requires that a machine does not have an existing driver set already associated to it because it can only match one rule, and every rule or every machine has its own rule as a default. The way to do then wildcarding when this, in this case, is you would have to remove the existing hardware that matches an existing rule, otherwise it won't actually match, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, so what I can do is I'll say add new hardware, and this will be the add new hardware wildcard, and I'm going to go ahead and call this one a latitude. And so every machine that matches latitude, I want to use the same set of drivers. Not that you'd use something quite this broad, but this is an example. So latitude wildcarding, and then what you can do is under the matching rule, you would type in star latitude, like that. Okay. Now over here that you have this drop down that says all hardware, which will show every bit of hardware, and then you have a couple in here that have existing driver set and some that do not. Some are red, some are yellow. Okay. You can tell the ones that have existing driver sets already associated to them because they are in red. And the reason they're in red is if you look at this is hardware matching rule, hardware matching multiple rules. So these machines already have driver sets, so it's not going to be part of this wildcard. However, the matching this rule, you have one that doesn't have any associated drivers, so it's going to be included with this driver set. So what you would do then is you create this driver set for latitude with this wildcard. You would save that, and then what's going to happen is then you have a special driver set specifically for latitude in here. I'm going to pull that up. latitude wildcarding. So that's where that fits in. Okay, so what we would have to do then is we'd have to go through those machines that did not have a matching to this because of the duplicate set and remove those from the system, re-add them without the matching driver set, and then it should match this matching rule for wildcarding and actually load the drivers for that. So the beauty of this is that now anytime you bring in a new latitude, let's say Dell comes out with a new model, all you would have to do is boot up with it. It automatically matches this rule, and without doing anything more, you can actually deploy to a brand new latitude with these existing drivers, assuming those drivers would in fact work with it. So that's kind of how that works.